Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BETSPERTS.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, happy Wednesday. We're a little early today because I got just for today, we're a little early. Hopefully we're catching you guys on the East Coast as you're wrapping up your work day. And we are going to wrap up the NFC South. You ready to go?
I don't know. Is this a better time? Should we revisit? Like, what was the reason we picked 8 Eastern? Or is that still the best time for everybody?
Well, typically,
I don't know. Yeah, that is fair. You are on the West Coast.
When we're not in the midst of summer, and I'm not getting barraged with emails and phone calls and meetings, which has been my week to this point. I am a little bit difficult. And of course, I'm getting pinged right as we speak. I'm getting pinged. I know, unbelievable. Work. And what was funny is it was right after I put myself on Do Not Disturb, and my people know that's a time to. Oh wait, he just hit it on Do Not Disturb. I need to ask this question. That's always how it goes. But that's
I put myself on Do Not Disturb on the company Slack, and then I had to go back into it to pull a graphic from our little channel. I wanted to download the schedules that you'd made for these two teams to take a look, and I see Reed Rooney right away. He saw that I went on Do Not Disturb right away. He's like, "Are you taking a nap?" Come on, it says show prep. I'm doing show prep, and he accused us of not. We do a lot of show prep, and I said, like,
I do a lot of show prep.
Once we get, I said once we get to the season, show prep doesn't exist. Show prep is the entire week. Show prep is handicapping and getting ready for the week. There's not like a distinct time for it. But this is, taking a lot of notes, trying to find some good nuggets for you guys, and also finding some on my own. I every time I do this, I think I'm halfway ready for this, and then I find a couple things. And it's like, wow, this is a goofy schedule, or I just hadn't dug deep enough into the schedule or this thing or some players that are missing. But yeah, we're this is a weird one. We are going to talk about the Super Bowl champions, and then also we will talk about the team that actually won the division last year.
That's right. And actually, I guess before we dive into this, we should give a little credit to show prep for that we get from other folks in the industry. My show prep generally consists of I read the Football Outsiders chapter. I go through the Warren Sharp's football preview. Just to kind of refresh and make sure, I find that especially useful in terms of kind of remembering, what exactly all of the, roster turnover was, and looking at the updated depth chart. I find that very, very helpful before we go into any given preview podcast. So hat tip to those folks for providing such valuable resources to help us get caught up as we prepare to bet on these teams.
You know what I look at too?
What else?
Absolutely. Football Outsiders, great. The Warren Sharp guide. Probably there's too many pictures for my ADD in there. There's too many charts. I get distracted in there, but a lot of good info in there. And his little, his roster charts, players added, and all that stuff. It's great. I look at the Wikipedia for last season.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Because
there's no Pro Football Reference as well, but the Wikipedia, if you type in like 2020 Saints, it is just like the most no frills anything. It's just like, here's where the game was. Here's who what. Yes. Like, it's very, very bare
Here's who all the coaches were. Here's the positional coaches. Yeah, that is very useful.
I use that one quite a bit too, because it's real simple and there's a lot. But yeah, we do learn a lot as we're digging in, and it's fun. And we always talk about this off the air, and I probably have on the air too. Like, we learn a shitload, and it helps us. This is what, we'd be a lot worse at betting if it weren't for doing these previews for you guys.
Oh, hell yes.
Thank you for watching us and allowing us to spend time on this.
Yeah. And I guess let's dive right in then to the New Orleans Saints and talk about 2020, which was the end of an era, right? The end of an era. Sean Payton finished his 14th year, I believe. 13 if you take out the year that he was suspended. And Drew Brees completed his also 14th year, right? Or 13 or 14.
10th. I think it was like his 10th in New Orleans.
No, he went to New Orleans in 2006.
Was that right? Who was that reading? 10. I had 10 stuck in my head for something.
He went in 06. He was there. He won his
Boy,
Super
are we
Bowl
old.
in what was that, 2010-ish? And then, or 2009. Yeah, 2009. And then, yeah. So this was a long time coach QB tandem in New Orleans that was extremely successful. And we now turn the page because Drew Brees has hung up his hat hung up his helmet and picked up his broadcasting hat. I believe he'll be on the Sunday Night Football broadcast. He's definitely part of the NBC family now. And he'll be in the, you won't miss Drew Brees. I promise you, he'll still be around.
You'll see him.
And
he's an affable guy. I think
he will be
fine
throwing
in the booth.
He will be throwing just as many catchable 25-yard passes this season as he did last season. But it won't be with the helmet on. That said, it was the end of an era. Drew Brees was extremely effective quarterback for the Saints. They were in it every single year. Winning only one Super Bowl felt a little low, but at least they won the one. At least it wasn't a Dan Marino sitch. Where he was constantly in the discussion. Never won an MVP, set a lot of all-time records. Tom Brady's going to break almost all those all-time records. So
you remember
not going to last long.
The laminated card they handed
him,
like
and Monday Night
game.
Football. That was extremely
such
cheesy.
a weird deal. And really the biggest thing you hit on there was you're talking about the entire arc of his career. I am, obviously right now we're focused in on the 2020 season, but to spread that out, not quite as far as you did, but over the past 3 years, with winning the division a few times, winning double digit and more games. It wasn't just like a 10-win season. These were good years for a few years. Yeah. It does feel like they missed a window at a second one. And it's tough. You can be the best or, one of the top 3-4 teams in the NFL. It's hard. It's single elimination playoffs. There's injuries. Like they did miss a window for a second one. They were 12-4, but the injuries really racked up last year. Great offensive line, stellar running back. Again, a guy who can do a lot of things, especially in the passing game. But with they bring in Mandy Sanders, he gets COVID. Thomas ends up out for the playoff games. Drew Brees, if he wasn't already thinking of retirement, breaking ribs, puncturing a lung, and then we make fun of his noodle arm. It turns out he probably had a decent tear in the rotator cuff and a plantar fasciitis, maybe a torn fascia on his foot too. So that guy was put together by duct tape by the end of the year. So if he wasn't serious about retirement, I think those late season injuries probably put that on ice. And that's that. The window is closed, and now they're kind of in cap hell. Not that cap hell isn't escapable in today's day and age. There's good GMs that can get out of that, but everybody has dead money. But they Breeze is $11 million against the cap this year. Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah. We'll get into more of their offseason changes in a bit once we close the book on the 2020 season. But it did, they did, this arc was important to cover because towards the end of it, they basically saved their franchise with the 2017 draft, the one where they got Lattimore and Ramczyk and Marcus Williams. And there were so many important players. Basically, every guy they got in the top half of that draft ended up being a key starter. And you needed those guys on cheap deals because they gave money to everybody else to keep the band together, to make a push to try to get one more Super Bowl in the Drew Brees era. Didn't happen. And now we get to find out what the consequences of that become. Yeah. Right. And I guess I would not say that their 2020 campaign was a success. They really, what was weird? They really got hosed in the seeding department to a degree. They ended up with the 2 seed, right? So they didn't get a bye. They could have used one. Instead, they had to play the Bears. That game was never really in doubt. They win 21-9. But even playing, I didn't think was as good as if they had had a full week of rest to prepare for Tampa Bay coming to town. They had to try to beat Tampa Bay a third time, and everyone knows it's tough to beat a team 3 times, Andy.
It is. Well, especially without your star receiver and your aging quarterback is clearly not 100% yet. What are you going to do? And the funny thing is, they were leading that game, driving for more points, and one fumble. It's kind of like last night. And, if you're listening to this later on or down the road, we're going to talk about the NBA Finals Game 6 because it was last night. But before that, Mr. Kevin Durant received a pass, shook around a little, turned around, and shot a 3-pointer that was a 2-pointer.
Yeah.
Went to overtime. They did not win that game. His toe would have been an inch further back, and that game is over. The Bucs season is done. They don't get this championship. Tampa, like that was it Jared Cook? Jared Cook fumble?
Game of inches, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think who was it with the fumble?
Yeah, it was Jared Cook.
Sure,
yes.
It was Jared Cook. Yeah,
he was because he was a fumble machine.
Even if they got 3 points there, they're up by 10, and maybe this whole Tampa Super Bowl doesn't happen. It's crazy on the littlest, and a fumble is a little thing. A fumble in the playoffs is a very big thing, but one play like that just turns things around. And I don't think the Saints were going to continue to, as beat up as they were and the injuries, it was going to be tough for them to get it done. But you talked about the third time. That's my final note, I think, on like their season. Since the realignment,
there's one
in
more
2002.
Go ahead. Very, 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 very important note.
You do yours.
Very important note. The Drew Brees did not start 16 games.
No,
he missed a spell in the middle. And who did they go to? Was it their
They went to Jameis.
They went to Jameis. Oh wait, no. They pulled the switch. Well, one time, but in that game they did. In that game,
they went to Jameis.
Yeah, right.
In the end game.
Yeah,
but then they pulled the switcheroo.
They pulled the switcheroo. Yeah, that's right. And it was the Taysom Hill show, surprisingly, who took over in relief for Drew Brees. And at the time, it was head scratching. There was no consequence for it. They won all of those games. I think was Drew Brees' first game back, the loss to Philadelphia. They won the 4 games where Taysom Hill started, I believe. Let me just double check.
I think they lost one because they won all of the.
Was that one the fourth one?
They won all of the Teddy starts the previous time.
Yeah, you're right. The fourth one was Taysom Hill losing to Philly. So Taysom Hill went 3-1 as a starter.
8-1 with Drew Brees out over the past 2 years. No, over the past 2 years, 8-1 with Brees out, which is, I mean, really a testament to the coaching, especially with, I mean, not only that, but when you were missing Brees, you were missing receivers for part of the time. With some of the stuff overlapped with the injuries. Thomas got injured a lot more than usual, I guess, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's still like the fact that Brees got injured, missed a bunch of games. They started a quarterback who really hadn't played quarterback all that much. They popped Jameis in there, who they weren't. I'm not sure they weren't super confident about, and they ended up still winning 12 games this year. Yeah. No one since the realignment, when we went from, there used to be something called the NFC Central. That's where my squad did group. But since the realignment, and when they created the NFC South as it is now, no team had ever swept the division. All 6 games. The Saints managed to do that, which was ironic that their season was ended by an NFC South team. So like, yeah, by the record books, by the raw like win-loss, it's like, oh, they had a pretty good year. But it was a weird season, I felt like, too. And yeah, they beat the pants out. You talk about beating the Bucs 3 times. They didn't just beat the Bucs. They beat them. It was like 72-28 total. I mean, they beat the ever-living piss out.
Let's not revise history too much. Game 1 was won on the back of some pretty lucky defensive, fluky. Tom Brady gave them 6 points via interceptions.
We'll get to Tom Brady, but early season Tampa was not late season Tampa. That was a weird team.
Yes, for sure. But that week 1 win for them over the Buccaneers, where they won by 11, was not, the scoreboard was not indicative. I will contend that. The primetime game in week 9 on Sunday Night Football, where they went down to Tampa and they won 38-3.
That was weird.
That might as well have been 70-3. That was just an absolute ass kicking. And I don't know why Tampa no-showed. I don't know how New Orleans came in with the perfect game plan for that one. I remember betting New Orleans and thinking they had a fighter's chance to get a win. I did not expect it to be by 35 points. But that's all that said. The defense stepped up when asked. After they had a shitty first 5 games. And then coming out of their bye, they played a bunch of mediocre to bad quarterbacks in a row. Let's see, this stretch from week 7 to week 14, They never gave up more than 24 points. In fact, there's some single digits in there, a couple threes, a 9. Was the Broncos game the 3 where they went against the wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean that game doesn't count. If you want to throw out the results of the Tampa game, we're definitely throwing out the results of that. I do it, and it's funny because you got a little contentious about a final score in a game. Do you want to discuss the final result of the Chiefs Saints game that was decided by 3?
No.
No, was that the? I'm trying to remember when I looked at them. Like, was that the game where Drew got really mad the next day?
Oh yeah, I laid 3, and the Chiefs should have won that one by double digits going away. Going away, and they fiddle fucked around and they let the Saints back in it, and they let the +3.5 players celebrate a win that was not well deserved, in my opinion. All that said. They win one playoff game, they lose a playoff game. Season wasn't really what you would call a success, especially considering their division rival Tampa Bay Buccaneers went on to win the Super Bowl. Drew Brees retires, and now we enter the 2020 off season. And I gotta say, they probably came through this about as good, if not better, than you would have thought when they left the field against the Bucs in January. Right? You knew, I mean, it was doom and gloom across the media coverage landscape at the time. Like, they're going to cap hell. They're not going to be able to bring anyone back. This team is screwed for a decade. Like, there was a lot of very pessimistic outlook for the future of the Saints. And as I look at the turnover, they lost some depth, but there are some teams like the Rams come to mind where, they lost more than the Saints ended up losing ultimately in terms of depth and impactful players. As we go down this key players lost here for the Saints, Malcolm Brown moves the needle for me a tiny amount at D-line. Janoris Jenkins moves the needle a tiny amount for me. Emmanuel Sanders, tiny needle move. Jared Cook, tiny needle move. And then Sheldon Rankins, tiny impact.
I mean, none of these guys moves it for me.
Who moves it for you?
I'd say Trey Hendrickson out of any of the. More than any of the defense. And I don't want to take anything away from Malcolm Brown, Quan Alexander. Janoris Jenkins. Yeah, like these were contributors to a good defense. But Trey Hendrickson had like 13
why
sacks.
I didn't have that noted. I thought Trey Hendrickson was the most overrated of those guys, and so losing him, I feel like that was a sell high kind of a deal. But maybe I'm wrong.
It was a flashy stat. It was a flashy stat year. Like, I don't think he probably not going to go somewhere and replicate or do better than that. But he's like a 10 sack guy if he's getting the right defense and the right system. And it is a deep defense. I don't think it's not good to lose these players, especially when you don't have a ton of draft capital. It's not like they were, in up shit's creek like Houston, but the draft capital being what it was, they did draft at the end. It's going to be more of a lot of the guys they're drafting. It's going to be just depth. So I think, I'm with you. Like, the needle doesn't move a ton on these losses on the defense. And truthfully, I'm not sure the needle moves a ton on losing Drew Brees. I think it kind of is what it is. It's not like you're Andrew Luck up and retires one day. We kind of knew it was coming. A smart front office, a smart management team, a smart coach was kind of prepping for this. You can't say this was on purpose because Drew Brees breaking ribs certainly wasn't in anyone's plan. But getting Taysom Hill some reps, Jameis Winston being a former starter, like having those guys in your room rather than some of these other teams when they have to move on from a good quarterback, they're not in a terrible spot as far as a team that lost a Hall of Famer, 6 defenders, and really, I think that's probably it. It's just the defensive
like the guys that I had circled.
I
had guys that were getting paid a lot or needed to get paid a lot circled that I was like, oh, dude, this could go bad for them. Like, to get under the cap, they could lose Lattimore, they could lose Williams, they could lose Armstead, they could lose Ramczyk, they could lose Thomas. Like this could go real bad for them. All those guys are back. And they're all really good contributors. In fact, you know what moves the needle for me more than Trey Hendrickson walking, because again, Davenport and Cam Jordan are still very fine D linemen.
Cam Jordan's like our age now, though. Cam Jordan will be
that's
good,
true.
but
That's
he's
true.
starting to get up
Cam
there.
Jordan's getting up there. He's up
He'll
there.
still be fine, though.
And you didn't see
right.
as much impact from him last year as you have in years past. There's no doubt. But what moves the needle more for me is a guy like Onyemata getting suspended for the first 6 games. Yeah. I think that is more impactful than losing a guy like Trey Hendrickson personally. But again, you're very, 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 very thin now. So something like an Onyemata suspension, something like an offensive lineman injury, that will be massively impactful. So this is now somewhat of a fragile team on top of the fact that they're turning over quarterbacks. I guess what would you? I don't want to move too far too fast down our rundown.
We'll get to quarterback
here,
but
like what were the Saints? What were the Saints for you in terms of their offensive ranking last year? Were they top 10?
They were very hard to judge. Both these teams we're going to talk about today were very hard for me to judge because Tampa Bay, and we'll get to this, was so volatile in the offense. And I think we learned that some of that was just Tom Brady hadn't had to learn a new system ever. And like it took a while even for the great one like that.
I still had I had Tampa. By the end of the year, I had Tampa's offense rated higher than New Orleans.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like especially that's what I'm saying. At the end of the year, if you divide the year up into quarters, the first 3 quarters, I'm like, I think Tampa's good, and then they'd have one of those games where they weren't, and I really struggled with Tampa. Whereas with the Saints, I struggled with, oh, now Sanders has COVID, and we're God knows who we're starting at wide receiver, or like Thomas is hurt. Like, how much can they rely on this? And then they do stuff, and it was almost, I'm making some comparisons up to Belichick and the New England Patriots there, but they did some things that were like, oh, maybe this guy is going to go down as one of the better coaches of all times if he can make adjustments like this. Like the Viking, some of the Vikings game where it's like, oh, we're just going to run, or we're going to use Taysom Hill and he's going to be a quarterback and he's going to be slash and run. Like the offense was very hard to grade for me because I didn't know what they were going to do. It's like, man, what's the game plan this week? Are they dicked? And then, Peyton would come up with a decent game plan, take what he had and try to make the best of it. Then they continue to win games, even fighting through some major injuries. They had continuity most everywhere else. But when you have a quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, go down, and you have to have some other guys step in, and then you're losing your receivers right away. Your passing game is super important. So the fact that their passing game was so in and out like that, it made it very hard for me to grade. But yeah, I had Tampa ahead of them. I probably had them about top 10.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. But you're right. That Pete Carmichael guy that you forget is, he's been there this is Pete Carmichael's 12th year. This is Sean Payton's 15th year. These guys have been together for a long time, and they are capable of crafting a game plan with replacement level players that can still get enough points to beat you. They had, and you bring up tons of great points. I forgot they didn't have Michael Thomas for a ton of last season. He was expected to be wide receiver 1 across the entire NFL. And he really, really was underwhelming in terms of his availability and his impact on Sundays. But yeah, at the end of the day, I had New Orleans offense finish 11th last year of all the offenses in the NFL. They were my number 11 offense. You know what the market has them power rated this year with Drew Brees gone?
Like 18, 19?
11th.
Really?
Yes, they have them power rated 11th. So the market is telling you, or at least telling me, that I don't really need to make any adjustments from when I finished the regular season with these guys last year to what to expect from them this year.
And we're talking changes, and you talked a little bit, and the opposite of that is the continuity. And I think maybe that's where I'm fine with keeping them the same and not doing a massive up, and especially what you just said plus what I just said. Sean Payton can take his situation, make the best of it. Teddy Bridgewater was not the quarterback that was going to fit into their system last year. And they still just like, all right, well, here's how we use Teddy for these 6 weeks. We'll make the best of it. We'll win a game by only kicking field goals one time. Like, they made the best of it. Like, you run that back all those times, they probably don't go 6-0 a lot, but they probably go like 4-2, 5-1 a lot. Like, it was a good team even with Teddy at the helm. So I think the faith we have to put in Sean Payton, combined with, did you know they drafted all 5 of their starting offensive linemen?
I did know that.
I don't know how many people can, like, that doesn't seem like something that should blow my mind, but How many people can say they drafted all 5 of their and they're good? There's some good Pete Ramczyk. I mean, there's some good starters.
They're great. Oh yeah,
yeah.
Great.
So having that continuity.
Even Ruiz is guard. That's a bonus. He's he's a future center without question. They can slide him.
He was
as
a center
right
in
guard.
Michigan.
Yeah.
So yeah, you bring that continuity of the offensive line. You bring a great.
It's a very good
all-time great running back. A really, really good, an all-time great coach, apparently, we're talking about. And then the problem is if the quarterback play sucks or it's really down, none of that might matter. And the fact is that Michael Thomas is still very, very good, but the wide receiver room stinks in general. If you want to look at it overall, they don't have any depth at that. They don't have a good number 2 with him yet. And like that might be the most important part. Having a good receiver room, having a good quarterback. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but yeah, if the quarterback play and the wide receiver is this thin, it might not be up to snuff from last year.
Yeah, let's move down a notch then and get to the meat of the discussion, which is QB decision. We've covered it, I think, completely fairly. This will be a top 5 offensive line if they stay healthy. I don't think that's really negotiable. This will be a top 10 offensive weapons unit between Thomas and Kamara practically alone. Those 2 guys, including some of the depth you have. Latavius Murray did a nice job with from depth. Smith, I thought, emerged pretty reasonably well as a slot wide receiver last year. Harris, looks like he has some promise. This is, I think, a top 10 unit from a weapon standpoint. The reason that they're stuck with a ceiling-ish of 11, 12, 13 in terms of offensive rating is because the quarterback is probably going to be Taysom Hill. And I think that is that is a known quantity. Taysom Hill will be probably the 26th best quarterback. Maybe the 25th, maybe the 27th. I mean, it is a narrow range. We know exactly what he can do. His skill set is relatively limited, and the more they put him out there, the more reps the league gets on him. I think the less likely he has some pop, some emergence, some takes a step forward to where you're like, this guy's the next. I don't even know if I can come up with like a fair comp for him in terms of his skill set because he's capable of. I guess maybe Tyrod Taylor. Like, is that like best case scenario for Taysom Hill?
Antoine Randall L. You know where I'm seeing him be the most dangerous. And when he was at quarterback, yes, he had a couple good games, but I'm gonna call that you had a good coach, good offensive line, and a really good running back to toss the ball to. And he has good legs. But man, when he catches balls out in space, it's like he's a scary ass tight end coming down the field. Like I'd like to see him catch more balls. I think he'd be a great weapon. I'm hesitant to put too much stock in my own quarterback evaluation abilities after the Josh Allen experience. That said, I don't have a good take on hey, how are the Saints at developing a quarterback? I don't fucking know. They've had the same one for 15 years. I think
we do know. We do know. We saw it. Taysom Hill was re-signed for big money as to be like the next guy for them.
Yeah, no, but we haven't seen him play enough.
Practice. I know, but they gave him practice reps. I know, yes, last season was a abbreviated preseason, but he had 4 weeks where they were giving him every QB1 snap in preparation for a couple games against some difficult defenses. At least in Philly and Denver's defenses, he had to have, they had to have some pretty kind of nuanced game plans there. So it's, and even in all that, I'm just not seeing it. I don't think that his ceiling is, think if there's not an, if everything goes right with Taysom Hill, right? Which is why it's so confounding that they're so determined to go down this road, because there isn't everything goes right for Jameis Winston. And it is definitely higher than 25th in the NFL in terms of QB play. That said, I'm not saying it will ever happen. You hate to kind of pin your future hopes on if everything goes right, but considering where they are right now as a franchise, where they have all of this talent everywhere else, and they're in an NFC that is relatively wide open outside of their division foe Buccaneers. I'm not sure why they're not going with Jameis Winston.
I get what you're saying. I think so. Let me ask you if this is where you're at in the range of outcomes. You're thinking Taysom has a much narrower distribution. Like he's not
maybe no distribution.
Yeah, like with working with a good quarterbacks coach, working with in the off season, working with the receivers, getting the tutelage, really putting in the work. He could be like a Josh Allen thing.
He doesn't have an arm.
Happen. That's the thing. He doesn't have a massive arm like that. He did, but that Josh Allen thing, who had the physical gifts, he needed to get a lot of shit right. That took a couple of years. The window for New Orleans is not a couple of years. So it's depending, I guess, what you want to do as a franchise, because if you go with Taysom, I think the ceiling's a lot lower. You probably end up in the playoffs, but as a lower seed, and you have, just what you had last year. Whereas the Jameis Winston experience, man, it could be high end. And that's the thing too. What, you talk about what helps a defense, and the other team will talk about what helped that defense a lot. Well, not getting put in, oh shit, Jameis just threw another pick and we're back out on the field again. Like when you throw that many picks, the defense, you're not putting the defense in good positions when it's, oh, they're at our 20 again. Like the defense is going to look bad. So Drew Brees we had a lot of negatives about him, but historically he had a low interception rate. He didn't have a lot of high, interceptable balls ever. As his arm got worse, it got worse. But as a whole, they had a pretty low volatility quarterback who used to have a decent arm. Now, if you do throw Jameis in, it's like, oh, the defense looks so much worse on paper because they're constantly being put in bad positions, and the offense is not scoring because they're turning it over or making bad throws. But on the other hand, when he was with Tampa in 2019, he led the league in yardage. He was not the league leader in touchdowns, but he was like top 5. It was a 30-30 year. That interception thing was just not great. So if they can work with him and get that out of him and get him making better decisions, maybe the LASIK helped. Although that one game he came in for Brees, and it's hard to dig on a guy coming in cold like that, not doing the game plan. He did have a couple passes where it's like, oh shit, that's Jameis, he's back. It wasn't like, oh, he threw a pick, but he threw a couple passes that were like, that could have been a pick. Like, buddy, you're doing the same shit. So that said, I'm still on it. Like, I would go for it. Your windows for these things aren't small. I said the window might be closed. I don't know if it's quite closed yet. So shit, do it up. The NFC is weak. You get the 2 seed, maybe run that rep. You play well enough, you can finish better than Tampa. The only bad thing is that you have the first place schedule. Tampa doesn't.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, I feel like you start Taysom Hill, your ceiling is 9-8, and your floor is 8-9. You start Jameis Winston, you could go to the playoffs. You might win a playoff game. Who knows? Or you could be 4-12 and be picking your next franchise quarterback, in which case you're probably better off because now you have this low-cost quarterback to go with an otherwise badass roster. That's like the perfect storm for competing in the NFL nowadays. So, this is like they really needed like a shot at a quarterback this year, realistically. A young quarterback and quarterback in the draft was, but it wasn't gonna happen. Like there was just no way that they were gonna be in position to land a guy like they needed. Like, you remember when the Ravens lucked into Lamar Jackson 32nd overall? They needed something like that to happen to them, where nobody was taking Fields and he slid all the way, and it was like, oh, wait a second, here, problem solved. We'll take Fields, get rid of these guys. Like, this is our future now, So I guess where I'm sitting, I don't love the decision that seems to be likely outcome at this point, which is Taysom Hill, because I don't think Taysom Hill is winning. He's not winning you playoff games for sure. You need like all universe defense to be a 13 win kind of team with Taysom Hill as your quarterback, and they're not there. So I'm hesitant to really ever be that. What's the right word? Like that pessimistic about a team that has this much coaching continuity and has this much of a clear, obvious record of success in today's NFL. Yeah. But I think the likelihood that this team surprises to the upside, considering that they seem to be on the Taysom Hill path is low.
Yeah. And beat writers seem to think Jameis is the front runner, whereas I don't, you don't. So this will be yet to be determined. We're not going to have a good take on this. When we get to odds, like spoiler, we're not going to have a great take on what to bet on this team, because I think it does make a big difference. Obviously, it's effing quarterback. It's the most important thing. Depth, fragile. You mentioned the word fragile. Yeah. Good book. There's a good book called Anti-Fragile. You should probably, you've probably read it. I'm talking to everybody else. You should probably read that. It's a pretty good book, and it speaks to, again, the opposite of what we have here. A team without depth is fragile. They can be quickly finding the tail ends of the distribution of outcomes that they have, and this team doesn't have a lot of depth in a few spots. If you have a quarterback that is not working out and you lose Michael Thomas again, this is going to be a bad team, despite what the defense is doing, despite how good the offense is, despite the coaching. It could be a problem. They can't continue to just make magic with bad play at the wide receivers position. So
yeah, I think they were better last year. If this is the Marcus Callaway, Jawan Johnson show, we got a problem.
Yeah, so the depth here is the biggest knock. So if this team decides to go with Taysom Hill, and it's looking like he's playing okay, it might be a team to start fading, because just look at anybody. It's so tough in the NFL against these NFL defensive coordinators. They figure stuff out. And if a guy isn't going to be able to, be calling plays and making decisions at the line of scrimmage at the highest level of quarterback, you're going to have issues. So I'm not super hopeful for this team.
I guess speaking of depth, if you choose Hill in this preseason, why keep Jameis on the roster?
Why draft a quarterback too? They drafted Ian Book, who is just never going to have a big enough arm to be an NFL quarterback. Like, that's just take another defender at that point. Why are you taking Ian Book?
Yeah, I don't get it. I really don't. Yeah, the depth issue is very concerning. They have a front line across the offensive line that is just bananas good. And then every single replacement player, to me, has not had enough snaps to step in and make an impact, or step in and even do give you replacement level production on the O-line. So that's a little spooky, considering Taysom Hill. He's a scrambler. He's a guy that's going to extend plays. He's going to use, they're going to do enough, interesting things to keep him going, even if the offensive line isn't 100%. Alvin Kamara, though, I think he benefits from the offensive line play. Overall, I think you see the offense take a step back if they suffer any injuries there. And then, the defense also very, very fragile. I don't know anything about this third cornerback here after Patrick Robinson and Malcolm Jenkins. Patrick Robinson and Marshawn Lattimore. Paulson Adebo.
Remember
Keith
we made
Washington
fun of Corn Elder?
Jr.? I do.
Right.
Where's he now?
You're right.
Where's he now?
The AFL? I don't know. His name is Corn.
No, like the third.
He probably still
you're going to be able.
Probably still plays for Carolina.
If you're an offense that has 3 wide receivers, you're going to be able to pick on a guy here. Marcus Williams is going to be asked to do a lot. Malcolm Jenkins is going to be asked to do a lot at the safety position in coverage, because these guys who are going to be asked to cover the third receivers out there or cover the wide receivers when they go wheel. This is a rough crew, man. This is a rough crew. So Lattimore injuries, spooky. Patrick Robinson injuries. Shoot, I don't even know how good Patrick Robinson is anymore, to be honest with you.
He's okay. I think he's fine. I have this as a very good defense with a big problem at depth, whereas a couple injuries could spin this into a bad team. So, if you end up with some bad luck and defensive injuries and the quarterback play isn't there, that's like, man, this is like a 6-win team. That's not great. But at the same time, stay healthy. You have the weapons, you have the coaching, you have a high-end, high-variance quarterback where you could win the division. As good as I think Tampa is, I think you have a shot at that. So, and this is tough. And if you want to, we'll get to the schedule. Like I just said, they don't they have a first place schedule, even though Tampa's like, oh, who won the division? I think a lot of people might accidentally say Tampa won the division. Saints won the division. The Saints swept the division, did not lose a game in the regular season. They don't actually have that tough of a schedule, I don't think.
I don't think any of them were even close.
It's a really weird one as far as we're going to get into some of these that are very busy in the colors. This one is maybe the most boring schedule situationally. They have a two-way street off the bye that helps mitigate the travel, the traveling across to Seattle that week, but you have the bye before. So like that kind of mitigates some of that. And then you get 3 spots where you're off back-to-back roadies. But 2 of them are against New England and Philly, which aren't projected to be, playoff teams. The Tampa one, that sucks. Like that's a really rough spot playing Tampa on Sunday night after coming back from New York. Otherwise, you have one of your Thursday nights has gone away because you're doing a double Thursday into Thanksgiving. And then that week, you have the easy coming off Thursday into the Jets game at the Jets. And that's it. Like there's no situational stuff hardly. And again, it's not an easy schedule, but it's certainly not one of the more difficult. So not a ton to say about this. I don't know what you picked up on this. It's very neutral to me.
Yeah, as me as well. And I guess just very weird Thanksgiving night game. Buffalo at New Orleans.
Classic.
The classic rivalry. Buffalo at New Orleans there. New Orleans a 1.5 dog at home on Thanksgiving night. I mean, the easy part of the schedule, I suppose, is the beginning. After that Green Bay game, you have 4 of your next 5 games are on the road. Obviously, you don't get the Superdome help, but those are all teams that you should be competing with or beating. Particularly Carolina, New England, Giants, Washington. So if you get off to a good start, you have the potential to get a wild card, I suppose. The bad part of the schedule, just in terms of opponent strength, is kind of right there in the middle. Seattle, Tampa, Tennessee, Buffalo. Those are 4 very difficult games for you to win, although you do get 3 of those at home. So it is, only 2 of those at home. Tennessee and Seattle, you're on the road. But yeah, this is not a hard schedule, really, even though it is a quote unquote first place schedule. No,
a lot of it is
extras. Who are the extras they drew? Seattle and Green Bay were the extras they drew. Yeah. Seattle, Green Bay, and who across division? Tennessee. So they're 3 extra for being first place, were Seattle, Green Bay, and Tennessee. So that doesn't really help them that much I guess that helps the Buccaneers because they get the second best team in the NFC North after Green Bay. They get the second best team in the NFC West after Seattle. I guess that's the Rams.
And the AFC South.
And the AFC South. That's good. Well, they get the Indy. So it's kind of a wash, other than the Green Bay Chicago difference, right? So it's not that much more difficult than the Bucs in terms of who they play, but it's easy because they draw the NFC East and the AFC East, right?
Yeah.
NFC East and the AFC East. That's a beauty. That's a beauty of a draw. That's a beauty of a draw.
And that's the random part about the scheduling, is that you're playing an entire division, in your conference, and an entire division in the opposing conference, and it just rotates. So like if you stumble into the NFC East and the AFC East, which yes, Buffalo is very, very good, but you're going to play some first place teams. That's just how life goes. But getting some rookie quarterbacks, getting the NFC East, getting the Panthers and possibly the Falcons not being all that great, it isn't bad for a first place schedule. And truthfully, here's the angle. It's like when I first looked at this, I saw the easy first 5 games, not easy, but the easier part of the schedule being that first 5 into the bye. And I'm like, yeah, what if they are like 4-1? is that a spot to bet Tampa? And then I went and, spoiler alert, Tampa's first part of the schedule. Like Tampa, for this to work, Tampa would have to have a tough schedule to start. They just don't. It doesn't really work out. So I don't see like a spot we need to be grabbing, New Orleans or grabbing Tampa if you think New Orleans is starting too hot. And then, maybe it would have to be after week 8 where New Orleans won that game. Like New Orleans would have to beat Tampa at home, and then we could maybe look at taking Tampa because if you feel that way, it depends how those teams are playing and how everything's going. But it's really kind of void of a situational angle where I want to grab someone in division later on in the year.
You know what this comes down to me? Over under in the playoffs, out of the playoffs. This comes down to me. The 2 games against Atlanta and the 2 games against Carolina. I think the 2 Tampas are. I'm gonna scratch those up as L's. I don't think you can score with Tampa. I'm gonna give the rest of their schedule against the AFC East, NFC East, and then the first place opponents. I think that's a little bit better than 500 for them. And so kind of it comes down. So right there, you're at 1 game under 500, right? You have 4 more games against the Falcons and the Panthers. If you win those 4, you're talking about a team that finishes 3 games over
10-7.
And if you lose those 4, you are 5 games under. And if you split, then you're like 1 game over. And I think that's a split is probably where this ends up. So I feel like 9-8, no matter how you kind of dice up the wins and losses, no matter how you kind of flip the coins for the close calls, 9-8 is where you end up with these guys.
Yeah, and it's pretty close to their win total. Like, again, this is not a team I'm very excited to bet on or against all that much. It'll depend. Once we get to the season, we see what happens with the quarterbacks. The win total is 8.5 juice to the over. Like, it's essentially 8 3/4. I mean, it's a flat 9. Like we're saying, it's a 9. It's a 9-8 team. The win total's over 8.5 juice to the over.
Let's pull that up and break them all down. Yeah. The Super Bowl 25-1, NFC 12-1, neither playable to me. Like, I'm saying this because I don't
a better
see
NFC price some point.
Yep. Well, we're saying they have an easy start. So presumably, if you're bullish on the Saints, take them now, and those numbers are going to get shorter. I'm just telling you that Taysom Hill is not a high ceiling guy and not a if everything guy. So I don't know that they're really realistically have a shot at the NFC or the Super Bowl or even the NFC South, because I think the world of Tampa Bay. So spoiler alert, to make the playoffs, yes, at plus 100. Is that a better bet than over 9?
It's probably 50-50, man. So it's a good price.
It's a good damn
price.
This
is not a team I'm getting involved with until I find out more about it. And then even then I might not. It might just be like, well, the market is pretty right on this team. Sometimes the market is right.
What you just
market
said, I think
1,
is
deep dive 0.
What you just said, I think is key. To make the playoffs, yes is plus 100, no is minus 120. The regular season win total, as you just mentioned, over 8.5 is minus 160, under 8.5 is plus 130. I am not getting involved in this team either way because I don't think that the unknowns are all that great. No. They have a long tail. They have a little bit of a long tail under because of the depth issue that we pointed out. But I am not running to the window to bet an alt under 7.5. I mean, a lot of things have to go wrong for this team to finish 7-10. Because that schedule is pretty soft.
Yeah, like a crash and burn season doesn't seem likely. And I was gonna get to this when we just kind of moved off the number. Like, yes, they do have a soft landing to start, but what Sam here in this chat said, if Tampa Bay gets really short, like they do have to adjust the markets. If there's a team that's playing really well and maybe one other surprise team, the markets start to shift towards those teams as everybody bets on them in season. So you might get some 15-1s, but it's not like the Saints. If the Saints get to 20-1, it's like we said last time, like it's probably not something you want to bet anymore. If they're 20-1 in season, like I think we've seen what we've seen, and we know what we know, and we're not going to bet him at that point. So you're probably right. Like, take him now. There's a decent chance that it gets a little better, but nothing to the tune of doubling. And again, if it does, we don't want to bet it.
Is this a good team to bet the under in games?
It depends on the quarterback. If Jameis is in, who knows, man? High volatility, pick sixes, turnovers. Could be a lot of scoring late in games, in late game situations. If they're down, if it's Taysom, I don't know as much. It's a good running team. I think they can sit on leads.
Under 8 is plus 190 at circa. If you made me make a bet on this team, I guess that's what I'm betting, because there is a chance that there's some injuries that accrue and affects them. There is a chance that they tank for a quarterback next year if they come to their senses and realize Taysom Hill's not the guy. If you made me make a bet on this team, I'm going to circa, and I'm playing under 8 at plus 190. So,
yeah, you probably get your money back on that like 4 times out of 10.
Yeah, I push probabilities pretty high. I completely agree with you. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Unless you want to do you want to do a win bet ad read? Are we still?
I forgot. I don't even have the graphic, dude.
Oh, okay.
Not even sure. Oh yeah, we can do it once. Yeah, bring it up, Dan. Because there is short time in this, and I'm getting a Yeti at the 3M Open this weekend. Like I said, I bought like a special ticket where you get a Yeti when you walk in the door and your first drink free. Oh, well, I'll just mention it. Sign up for WinBet, get a Yeti.
Yeah, get a Yeti. Let's talk a little bit about the championship Buccaneers, and we can take our time on this a little, I suppose. Although I got to think at 5, I got to get going. Shoot, I put us up against the wall here, man. Sorry.
No worries. What is there to say? Again, when we get to changes, not much change. So let's just talk.
Well, let's talk. Yeah, 2020 season. Okay, I got to real quick do a mea culpa here. I had low expectations for this Buccaneers team because I did not love the fit with Tom Brady and Bruce Arians. I did not love what we saw at the end of the New England, the end of the New England arc for Tom Brady. To me, he looked. I had too high of a probability that Brady was washed. And in my numbers, as we entered the 2020 campaign, and some of that was he just needed better weapons. He needed to be reinvigorated. He needed, a new challenge. And pretty clearly, it was a rocky start. But coming out of that bye, this team was absolutely dynamic. They were impossibly good. They were miraculously healthy, getting healthy for whatever reason. Credit to the Tom Brady method, TB12 method, I suppose. But this was a complete team on paper with the question mark of, does Tom Brady fit? And motherfucker. This is why I've been through this during the work.
No, I was there. I was there with you. It wasn't the kind of offense that Tom Brady was used to. And in fact, it was the worst kind of offense you really could have thrown him into, where you're asking him to hold the ball longer than he liked to and get hit a lot at age 40, God knows whatever. So really, you're right. I was right there with it. I think we just underestimated how good he would be at acclimating to a new situation.
Well, bending the coaching staff to his will. I think.
And not only that. Yeah, I was going to say Bruce Arians. Exactly what I was about to say was they kind of met in the middle. Sure. It wasn't a full all right, we're going to do things Tom's way, and Tom didn't just decide we're going to play the same offense that we're used to over here. They did kind of meet in the middle on this, and I guess they were happy with the results. Obviously. Look at that. I think my camera went wonky on me. So my biggest notes were they were very, very inconsistent early in the season. There were quotes from Brady saying, still learning the offense. And he had been in the same place for a long time. So maybe there was something to that. Eventually they, like you said, they just started to fucking peak, and they were very, very good. All of a sudden they were putting stuff up, but from a betting standpoint, a very hard team to bet on or against early in the season because they would just lay eggs. You talk about the second New Orleans game where it's like, what is this offense right now? If this is what we're going to do, and against a New Orleans team that is kind of, not losing games, but the possibility that this team is about to start sputtering with the injuries, and that's what you're going to do against. And I bet New Orleans that day. We were happy as clams, but it was very weird. And then the next week, it's like, well, Carolina's kind of a covering team if you wanted to get in bed with them, and Tampa Bay just went and put 50 points up on them. It was a very up and down team. It made it hard to gauge them during the year, but once we got to a certain point, it's like, all right, this is a good team. They really didn't have injuries. They had some O-line injuries. There was some offensive line shuffling. They did a good job of stopgapping and backfilling. And then really the only major injury besides offensive line, Vita Vea. And as it turned out, like that wasn't the losing a massive run stopping guy isn't going to slow down your offense.
That's true.
That's always been true.
Yep.
But yeah, I didn't have a lot of hot takes on how the season went. It was just a weird year, and they got hot.
That's exactly right. And the off-season changes, we can blow through this as well. Nothing.
They drafted at the end.
They drafted it. Yep, they drafted the end. They bring in Gio Bernard, Joseph Jones, the linebacker. They guys that moved on are guys that I don't think took many meaningful snaps. AQ Shipley
played.
He retired in the middle of the season, I thought. So they obviously got along fine without him. Antonio Brown similarly had a very limited role for this team. They don't bring him back, but otherwise, this is let's run it back, guys. Let's run it back. And for all of those reasons, the expectations are high, at least in the Whale household, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2021. This much continuity, another year in a system, another year of just really a lot of younger players a lot of younger inexperienced coaches in Byron Leftwich on the offense in particular, with some young players on the defensive line, some young players in the linebacking core, some young players in the secondary with a Todd Bowles coordinated defense. Like, there is a very fair, reasonable expectation that your baseline projection for a lot of these players should be higher in 2021 than the production that they came to the table with in 2020. Is that fair?
I don't have a lot of knocks. Really, so many things went right. So we already touched on it. Like Tom Brady, and again, I'm gonna talk to your baseline. Like, your baseline doesn't go down. There's going to be a time where all of a sudden Father Time maybe catches up to him. I don't know. He doesn't eat strawberries. He's got like everything figured out about like his personal chef, and he's doing his TB12 stuff, which is probably illegal, but he's 3 steps ahead of everybody, so it doesn't matter. And really, like, Father Time doesn't catch up with him. I think you see the same kind of year out of him. You have an all-world receiving core. You had an offensive line that played pretty decent, even with some injuries. The defense came together nice. And yeah, everything else they brought in, like, Gronk looked shitty. Gronk looked washed. He comes in, does a pretty good job a lot of the times just as a blocking tight end, shoring up that offensive line, but he was good. You hit on a receiver in the draft. You didn't even really need to. Tyler Johnson was a decent, like, 4th or 5th option. You really hit on a young corner in Antoine Winfield Jr., or, safety.
Yep.
But he is great. We talk about this all the time. It's really hard for a young defender to come in and play well right away, and he didn't. But he came along and really, really played well. Of all the offensive linemen in the first round drafted, I think Wirfs was the best over the entire sample. He graded out better than Thomas and Wills, and I think was there 5 guys that were drafted in the. How many offensive linemen were taken in the first round that year?
Well, there were 4 in the top half of the draft. It was
that was our
Wills,
bet. Remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah, there were like 7.
Wills,
like,
Wills, Becton were Ruiz. Ruiz, who we talked about, was taken. He's the one who cashed the bet, but he graded out better than Becton, Wills, and Thomas. So getting him, and then having Shaq Barrett and JPP play as well as they did from the edge, it was like, oh shit, like everything is just clicking. And that's what was surprising when they'd have some of those games where it wasn't quite working. Yeah. And a lot of it might have been just Brady wasn't quite there with the offense. So, Evans, Godwin, Gronkowski, Brown, and everybody else, we'll get to the schedule eventually, but I'm just spoiler, they're average of a 6-point favorite if you average their 17 lines.
Wow.
They're going to be good. Like, it's not often that you see a team like this. Like, how many teams have we seen over the years? Like, Manning wins his last Super Bowl. He's gone. The team just drops. You know, the Patriots for the most part have maintained a lot, and you know, the Chiefs were very good again this year, but you do see this sometimes where a team has trouble getting right back to the mountaintop because they've put themselves into a small window. They won their Super Bowl. It's like, man, this window's wide open again. And 2022 is going to bring some cap problems for them. There's going to be some hits. This is if they're smart, and I believe they are, they will, you know, try to take advantage of this and do anything they can if they need to make any more moves, because this might be it. It's going to get expensive here soon. So I have very high expectations. I don't know. My only knock on them, I found something, and I feel bad because I don't know where I copy and pasted this out of into my notes. I feel like it was Mr. Sharp's guide, but it might have been the Outsiders. They were number one with lowest number of adjusted games lost due to injuries, which isn't all luck. I mean, some of that is taking care of yourself, having good training staff, good practices, but they also ranked fourth in net EPA gain to turnovers and fifth in fumble recovery percentage. So some of that stuff, if it regresses, they could be a little worse, but they're still probably, I mean, what's the floor if there's not like let's take out the outlier of like a catastrophic injury or a bad cluster injury. Floor's like 10 in a bad situation, 11. I have trouble saying the floor is 10. If
I do too.
I think
really
the floor,
do too.
I started to say it and I'm like, 10 sounds low. 10's lower because we have 17 games, and I think it's 11. The floor might be 11.
No. I mean, this is like classic late stage Tom Brady Patriots. Easy ass schedule, just an absolutely yoked team, a defense that not only is complete, doesn't have a weak link, but has a good coordinator, good scheme, bunch of young players who are getting
Even
better.
Bunting is getting better.
Like everybody's getting better, and they're in a good scheme with a good coordinator. Like this defense could win you games if Tom Brady has, you know, a true stinker. Right. So, yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't know what the path to losses is for these guys, because they have, I mean, I guess it's, you know, it's a bunch of swing passes to Lenny Concrete Hands Fournette. That part of the playbook can get lost in the Tampa Bay with the Lombardi trophy for all I care.
Lose that in the water.
Yeah, lose that in the water. But I mean, the momentum that they had, that they came out of the bye with, that they carried through to 3 road playoff wins, and then a home Super Bowl.
And then a home Super Bowl. Very odd.
Yeah, home Super Bowl win. I mean, I do not see why they do not carry that momentum right into the beginning of this season, which brings up the schedule. Let's hit it, Dan.
This is a lot more color. I mean, there are a lot more things going on, but at the same time,
a lot more blue in the lines as well, though.
Yeah, they're favored in every game but 2 as they head to LA.
Shouldn't they be favored in LA? I don't know.
That's the thing. Line. What's your percentage chance that they're a 1-point favorite when they head to LA?
Better than 50-50.
I think it's like 60-40, because we might not see, if Stafford doesn't work out right away and they start strong versus Dallas and Atlanta, which are some suspect defenses to say the least. If the offense looks good for 2 weeks and Stafford's struggling to catch up, or
it's just taking a little bit of time it's taking some time for that gel to gel.
No, yeah, for sure. You can't even blame them. It's 3 weeks, very reasonable. So I would not be surprised if they'd be favored there if their offense shines the first 2 weeks, which it should.
I would expect them to be favored by more than 2.5 at New Orleans. I would expect them to be favored at Indy. Yeah,
the Indy one too.
I think they'll be favored in all 17 games, and most of them will be in the touchdown range. This is a super team.
Yeah, it's a very good team. My notes in the schedule is like, they didn't win the division. It's not a first place schedule. And actually, if you go by regular season win total percentages, it's actually a top 10 easiest schedule, which is laughable. Like, this team was the best team we saw in a while. And the playoffs were a little weird. They were road games. It was road games against a quarterback who'd never started, especially a playoff game.
The Black Swan, it was a weird Black Swan. So the Black Swan for the Bucs, if, setting aside QB injury, because I don't know the Blaine Gabbert show, I have a very different opinion of this team. But the Black Swan event is that both Jensen and Marpet get injured for a meaningful chunk of the season, and you have replacement level players in the interior of that offensive line, and Brady's getting peppered. If they had, because they really didn't operate much of that get the ball out of the hand quick kind of offense. It was like exactly like you said. It was meat in the middle. It wasn't let the play develop and have perfect timing down the field with the guys who can create separation. It was kind of, we are just going to dominate the intermediate range here, and we're going to get the ball out of it relatively quickly. We're going to have super pocket integrity, and we will just beat you to death with efficient offense. And I would expect that, short of a cluster injury on the interior of the offensive line, that is a completely reasonable expectation for this offense in 2021. I have them currently as the barely number 2 offense after Kansas City in my power rankings. I have them as the number 2 team barely after Kansas City in overall power rankings. I have this defense as top 5, and I think that there is a reasonable likelihood they get to their bye undefeated. I think there is a reasonable likelihood this is the last undefeated team, and I think that 3-1 to win the NFC is going to get massively short when it sinks in that they will have the one and only 1 seed locked up relatively early. I think this 3-1 number is going to move, and it's going to move pretty aggressively.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple other notes on the schedule I had. It was an easier schedule. The bye, the bye does get neutered because football teams have the bye too. They have 3 back-to-back roadies, but the second legs are all against non-playoff projected teams. They have 2 of their divisional opponents late in the season coming off their back-to-backs, facing them as the back-to-back in New Orleans and Carolina. That's a definite plus as you're making the push towards playoff seeding. That's not great for everyone else. Nice extra rest spots off Thursday Night Football versus Atlanta and Chicago. Again, teams that probably aren't projected to make the playoffs. They get the rookie head coach on Thursday night. Not everybody gets that. And then the last negative is the Giants get the mega bye. I'm giving it that name. The Giants get the, not only coming off the bye, but coming off the bye into a Monday Night Football game.
Extra day. And even extra day.
You get 1 extra day. So
I'm going to argue against that. That is not a mega bye. That is a marginally neutered bye, because Tampa also gets an extra day from Sunday to Monday.
That's true. They do get an extra day to prepare for a team off the bye. Well, any Monday night game, I guess. So yeah, we'll just call it a regular bye. Yeah, I think the crux of this was what I said was, I was confused by this team, and maybe it wasn't so much me being confused, but just the buy-in wasn't there from everybody. We said a lot, there were some people that met in the middle, and a lot of it was just, Arians, Todd Bowles, Byron Leftwich, and Tom Brady. And Todd Bowles less so. I mean, he wasn't a big part of the offense, but he certainly did some things with this defense over the past couple of years with not only player development, but just in-game coaching, what they've done. Once the 3 men in the offense between Arians, Leftwich, and Brady kind of got to the right place late in the season, it just became a really good offense. And again, you throw a really good team with a really good offense, a very smart quarterback, and then you give them some luck, like, you're fucked. Like, you get to face Heineke, you get the Jared Cook fumble, you get LaFleur besides himself being an idiot, like LaFleur beating Rodgers, so you don't have to. And then you're in the Super Bowl at home. Like, you take that good of a team and give them all that luck. Like, what are you going to do? They're going to win the goddamn Super Bowl. So,
yeah. And I guess I'm not really running and saying like this is the lock of the century, 3-1 Tampa Bay to win the NFC is an easy bet. Don't forget about blah, blah. My entire thesis is literally, this is your 1 seed.
Yeah.
Everyone else who is even in contention. Everyone else who is even close to in contention in the NFC has demerits, or tough schedule, or tough conference, or thin at player of position blank, or quarterback still somewhat of a question mark. Tampa has none of those questions. And so this 3-1 is going to look damn good when they are the 1 seed on a bye and everyone else is duking it out in the mix wild card weekend to try to come to your place. And at that point, they may be overvalued. Hell, they may be overvalued in lots of those games we were just looking at. I do not know if I will be laying the points with this team on the regular, especially once it gets adjusted up into their power numbers in the 7-8 range. Like, I'm not going to be laying points with this team regularly because I don't know how well they can put away a lead. They put away a lead well in the Super Bowl because their pass rush was absolutely clicking. Like, they knew exactly the snap count on every freaking snap. But the running game, I still have some questions about their ability to put away a lead. And you know, I don't think they need to win with margin regularly because I think they're going to be playing from ahead a lot. And so, you know, I think a lot of their wins, they can come from behind like absolute champions. They are perfectly set up to stone you as you try to put away a game with the run, and they can pass their way back into a game. So they are always live for a comeback. And you know, so I doubt I will bet them much at all this season, outside of, you know, maybe a couple of small spots where I feel like there's an edge. But
yeah,
you know,
and that was,
you're gonna have to lay a point. You're gonna have to play big points a lot with this team.
If they maintain what they did when they came out of the bye, more motion, more play action, and the offense started clicking, if that continues, it's going to be a very tough offense to compete with. We'll keep an eye on things. Obviously, as the year goes by, we'll make adjustments and see how they play. If that continues, it's going to be a very hard team to beat. But at the same time, it will probably be overvalued. I think at the same time, we can say, like, hey, if you find it to win the NFC near 4-1, that might not be a bad bet. And at the same time, say, I'm going to take teams as a double-digit dog versus them during the year.
Yeah, like
that's
last
how the
year's
market is going
KC.
to be.
Yeah, like last year's kind of KC formula.
We bet against Kansas City a bunch.
Yeah, that could very well be. I can entirely see it. But guess what? I want the NFC ticket in my pocket right now because that number is going to be a heck of a lot shorter in January. And I may choose someone else come that, you know, once we see what the playoff structure looks like, once we know a little bit more about the, you know, the path to victory, there may be a better choice of who's going to come through and go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. But 3, you know, plus, I guess let's pull up the odds right now. You can actually get even better than that. Plus 375. My goodness gracious. Almost 4-1 to win the NFC. That number is going to, I doubt we see 2-1 around by the middle of the season. And I doubt that it's shorter than plus 100 or longer than plus 100 once we get to the playoffs and they're the clear number 1 seed. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the odds that we saw as teams got in, and the difference being here too. And we got to start thinking this way, just as like we have to start switching our brains over to think about things as a 17-game season. You got to start thinking about the fact that this 1 seed means so much more now. Like, it's such a huge advantage. Obviously, it didn't work out so well for one team last year, but having that, not having to play and have this playoff luck, like, that's going to be huge. If the NFC is down, if the Rams, the 49ers fail to set themselves apart, the NFC East does what they're supposed to do. The NFC North, you know, you could have, I guess, Rodgers comes back, that offense plays well, you have competition with that. But the odds of getting the 1 seed, if nothing goes wrong in Tampa, is pretty high. And having that is a huge advantage on the field, making everyone else playing at home at the end of the year. Yeah, it's, if you can get a close to 4-1, that's not a bad ticket. And again, like I said, I'll still be fire the cannons, and I'll still be betting against this team if they're 12-point favorites at home against a team that can score.
Yeah, like Falcons. Okay, so I'm not going to play them to win the Super Bowl at 7-1. That's not quite enough for me. I don't think they're going to be meaningful favorites in the Super Bowl against whoever emerges from the very, very competitive AFC. And there's really not a lot of other ways to attack this. To make the playoffs, yes is minus 650. Ooh, wow. No is plus 450. That's the other reason I like them to win the AFC at 4-1. That feels like a low risk ticket. Like, they're going to be in the playoffs. You know, like, even if it doesn't get meaningfully shorter, which is my whole thesis of why to play it.
That ticket's still not dead.
They're going to be in. It's still not dead, right? Exactly. Regular season win total over 11.5 is minus 150. Over 11.5 is minus 150. Woo, my goodness.
Shop around.
Under is plus 120. Okay. The final thoughts on Tampa Bay and the 2021 season. Have I sufficiently jinxed Tom Brady at this point?
I think he might not get hurt this year. He might get hurt before the season starts. You've talked so much good. Like he might go full Dustin Johnson and just fall down a flight of stairs. Somebody in the chat did ask, what about them to have the most wins? I did just find a 5-1 at an offshore for most wins. So 5-1, they are second favorite there to the Chiefs, and we'll get to the Chiefs.
Here's why I like NFC almost 4-1 better. There's not going to be a lot of pressure on them to get the most wins. Right?
You need Green Bay. You need Green Bay to play well.
Right, exactly. There's no other team in the NFC that I think can stand out to the tune that there's really going to be a ton of pressure on them to get that 1 seed. Right, path to victory for the 1 seed to me is clean. Path to most overall wins means you got to hope none of these AFC teams like really hit their peak.
And you need Green Bay or San Francisco or LA to push you along.
Otherwise, so that you're starting guys in week 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, you need to be playing those games to win. That's tough. And somebody did say South Point has 4-1. Go down there, see Jimmy, get a hot dog, bet that. Maybe that might even, and you get a paper ticket. Unless
that's
you have
the most wins? 4-1?
No, 4-1 to win the NFC.
Ooh, beautiful. That's why you shop around, guys. Shop around. All right, that's a perfect way to put a bow on this. Great job, man. That was fun as hell.
This was a fun one.
Yeah, God, dude, I'm fired up for the season, and we get to see Tampa Bay, Dallas week 1, so that'll be fun. Talk about an over spot. My goodness gracious.
Yeah, we've already mentioned how that game ends like 21-14.
No, 38-28.
It'd be a lot cooler if it did.
All right, well, let's hit the music. Thank you again for tuning in. We are now 1/4 of the way through our season previews, and we will keep it a surprise what is up next week, but it's another division that I'm excited to talk about. So those are going to be great. They'll be great. Get your popcorn.